This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome to this special edition of NC Spin. Special because this show marks the beginning of our 16th year of broadcasting. Balanced debate for the Old North State, the longest running independently produced television show in North Carolina history, talk show. And because it's also special, we mark the beginning of the year with a one-on-one interview with North Carolina's Chief Executive, our Governor, Pat McCrory. Welcome, Pat.
Well, congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Well, thank you. It's been kind of a rocky takeoff here these first 8 months or so. Tell us, during these first 8 months of your administration, what surprised you, both pleasantly and unpleasantly, as well as what you've learned from this first term.
Probably what surprised me the most was there was no attention on the operations of state government, on the day-to-day operations of state government. And that's the first thing my cabinet members told me. And I've got the best cabinet in the United States of America. I'd put my cabinet team with any corporate board in the United States of America. I'm very proud of them. I hope the public gets to know them more because not a lot of attention has been focused on them. But my surprise was the lack of focus during the past 10 years on the basic operations of state government, which is causing a lot of our issues. And I probably spend 80 to 90% of my time on day-to-day operational issues, or at least getting reports back to them. I was going to ask
you, how did that affect? I mean, because you came in talking about how deplorable our IT and the building maintenance and communication between the agencies was. How did that affect this first 8 months?
Well, it's impacting the budget because what we had was over a $500 million overrun based upon Governor Perdue's projections on Medicaid. And our costs are about 30% higher than most states in Medicaid administration. And so we've had to spend so much time. Aldona Voss, who is an excellent DHH secretary, she's under fire. Yeah. She's working for $1 a year, a public servant. She's probably averaging 16 hours a day at work right now. And just basic operational issues. But, you know, when I look at what we've accomplished in the first 8 months, we changed and revised the State Personnel Act, the first time that's been done in 25 years. Didn't get nearly as far as we wanted to. You know, we found out such things as the average appeal process to deal with a state employee who's not doing a high-performance job takes over 400 days.
Wow.
And, you know, you just can't operate efficient government under those restraints.
Yeah.
So we kind of found out about these things once I came into office. But, you know, we implemented the most aggressive transportation reform that this state has ever seen. We changed a policy that's been in place since 1988. I tried to change it as mayor of Charlotte and couldn't get to first base.
I want to talk about that a little later in the show.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So, but, you know, what surprised me also was the minute I started, the day after I interviewed you, on my first day, the attacks started coming.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. The mainstream media.
I wasn't given much of a honeymoon.
No, the mainstream media has really been pretty rough on you. Do you feel treated fairly? And you've been around for a few years. How do you compare the treatment the media has given you with what they gave Governor Perdue and Governor Easley?
I can't compare. I do know this, that this has been a very coordinated effort by outside groups through groups like Progress North Carolina, groups like Common Cause, groups like Public Policy Watch. They're all almost the same P.O. box. And it's the same groups that were fighting me in my campaign. I assumed the Democratic operatives would go, let's give this guy a chance. But they didn't. And they feed stories to the media every single day, and the media is looking for stories, and they take them.
Well, particularly the national media has picked up on some of
they're fed to, listen, the stories in the New York Times didn't happen by accident. The stories in the Huffington Post don't happen by accident. These are very professional political operatives, but I'm a big boy. I can take it. I'm here for the long run, not for short-term media battles.
Now, there's normally, our Constitution creates 3 branches of government, administrative, judicial, and legislative. There's normally some friction between the executive and the legislative branches. You certainly experienced some of that. What's the relationship been with the legislature? Was it more or less contentious than you thought it would be?
I think we got 80% of what I wanted out of the executive branch. I asked for 6 to 7 major proposals, and I got all but 1 or 2. And I consider that a pretty good batting record. They passed 2 or 3 pieces of legislation, which I strongly opposed. The major criticism I had was literally just during the last 2 or 3 days of the legislature, which is part of the old culture.
Always a
The old
disaster.
culture
Yeah.
here in Raleigh, politics, is to wait until the last minute and throw things in bills. And we were blindsided by some things.
Yeah.
I strongly disagreed with education policy being put into the budget. And I think we're paying for it today.
Right.
And I think a lot of legislators were against it too.
I got to ask you about the vetoes. All right. You said you called Michael Jordan for traveling. I want you to explain that.
Oh, that was back in 1984.
Yeah, but
at
you
ACC
said that
All-Star
about,
game.
yeah, but you said that about the vetoes that you made.
Well, you know, I'm not afraid to make the tough calls, even when I irritate my friends. And I knew when I vetoed it, the chance of winning that veto was almost impossible, but I had to let it be known. First of all, I strongly disagreed with the 2 pieces of legislation. They were poorly written.
Out of 300 bills, you vetoed 2.
Right.
Yeah.
The other veto I could have done was on the total budget because of the education policy on it,
Right.
but I would have paralyzed government.
Yeah.
But these 2 bills, the media kind of portrayed them as minor bills until I lost the vetoes. Then they said they were major bills.
Exactly.
But frankly, I think one of the bills was a major immigration bill, which I think is going to be harmful to the state.
I got to ask you, Speaker Tillis running for the nomination for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
A lot of rumors that maybe Senate President Pro Tem Berger might be also running. I don't want you to get your crystal ball out and predict that. But if that is the case, we're going to see new leadership over in the legislature next year.
In fact, I think that
will this put you on a better footing with them?
Well, first of all, I had, again, 80% of the time great footing. It was very similar to my career as mayor of Charlotte. I'm going through a very similar dynamic as I did in my first year as mayor, where I was challenged. The status quo, the media elite, the political elite, the editorial elites challenged me, going, this guy's not strong enough, he's not taking stands and all. I had the exact same thing as mayor in my first year at the age of 39. And I had that with my city council. My city council challenged me constantly. But what I've got to understand, this is not a battle, it's a long-term marathon. And in the long run, I've got to look at what we've accomplished. And I think we accomplished more in the first 8 months of this administration than any administration that I know of in the last 30 years. And I'm proud of that. And you didn't read it on the front page or see it on RAL, but major transportation reform, major tax reform, major personnel reform, major commerce reform. Those were the boring stories that are going to have a big impact on the state of North Carolina. Absolutely.
One of the things that was in your agenda, because I sat in your budget presentation, and you said you wanted to see a pay raise for teachers and state employees. Yeah. That didn't get in there. Are you going to be pushing for that in the short session?
I am. Of course, I've got to protect the legislature in one respect here. After I made that pay raise proposal, and I had it in my budget, the Medicaid costs just exploded. So, listen, I will tell you when I think the legislature did a bad job, including the education proposals. But in their defense, when you lose $535 million over your budget, which was not projected correctly by the previous administration, then there goes the pay raises.
Yeah.
So, but
because what is it? 1% is $100 million a year.
Yeah. So we could have had $500 million.
Yeah.
So that's big money. But I'm very pleased that I knew some of the education policy they threw in the budget was wrong, and the process reminded me of the process that I used to criticize the Democrats of. But, you know, I worked with the state school board, and we've already reinstated the master's pay through May and June. Yes. And then I think in short session, I anticipate the legislature correcting some actions very quickly.
All right, before we go to a break, public opinion polls, with all that's been going on, public opinion polls are being widely discussed. Your opinion, favorable ratings are down. The legislators' favorable ratings are down, particularly, they say, with unaffiliated voters and women. To what do you credit these ratings?
I'm shocked they're as high as they are. I mean, if I read the local newspaper here, I'm not sure I'd support me here either. Yeah. But I know the truth, and we're going to get out what we've done, what we've accomplished, and I think the results will be seen. And
so
I'm
your
very
dog
pleased
doesn't
with
even
that.
like you.
My dog is the only one who might like me right now. But listen, I've also got to remember public policy polling. They're very accurate on election year because they do a certain type of surveys during election year. Off election year, it's they have an agenda, and the agenda goes along with some of these other groups, and they're very tied in with each other. And I know that. Maybe the public doesn't know it, so I know it.
Yeah. I hope you're enjoying our special interview with Governor Pat McCrory, and want to remind you can view it again anytime you want to. Recommend it to a friend. Just go to our website, ncspin.com, and click on the YouTube button on the right side of the page. We post each week's show, by the way, on Friday, so you can view us anytime you like. And while at ncspin.com, be sure to sign up for our free weekly email newsletter, Spin Cycle. Join in the ongoing discussion at NC Spin on Facebook. And you can follow us at Twitter at NC Spin Tweets. We look forward to hearing from you. More with Governor McCrory after this.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Fishing isn't just part of my job, it's my life. It's a part of who I am and how I was raised in eastern North Carolina. It's how I put food on the table for my family. It's hard work, but I love what I do. There's something special about knowing that my long, hard days help feed friends, neighbors, and people in North Carolina. It might not be glamorous, but fishing is my life.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception. Keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Do you have questions about the foods you eat and the farmers that feed us? If so, register to attend the Food Dialogues North Carolina. This free panel discussion will include food and farming experts talking about what's on our plates, the importance of consumer choice, and how farming and food production have changed over the years. The Food Dialogues North Carolina is September 19th at the Raleigh Convention Center. Registration is free, but space is limited. Visit fooddialogues.com to register now.
We now return to NC Spin.
We're celebrating our kickoff for our 16th year with a one-on-one interview with Governor Pat McCrory. Governor, in your first 8 months, as you said earlier, you announced a number of major reforms. I want to talk about them some. Let's start with DHHS and Medicaid.
Yeah.
Medicaid consumes $13 billion every year, with about $3 billion of that coming from state funds, the second largest appropriation in our budget. Every recent administration has declared Medicaid was a mess.
Yeah.
Is this a tiger that just can't be tamed?
We have no choice but to tame it because the pain's getting so great. It's been, in fact, we didn't really have a balanced budget last year. I don't care what the Republicans or Democrats says, what the previous governor or the Republican legislature says.
Because of Medicaid overruns.
They had several $100 million underneath the rug, and we did honest accounting this year. But it's going to continue unless we reform Medicaid. And we're asking for a waiver. We're going to be asking for waivers from the federal government to give us more flexibility on implementing Medicaid, but we're stepping on a lot of special interest groups who want to keep the status quo because they're surviving year and year, from the hospitals to medical groups to regional corporations, insurance companies. But their economic model will not stand either. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to probably be spending the next 2 months of my life meeting with all these different associations who are fighting any change. Now, there was one piece of legislation that I got put in the budget. That's a secret. Don't tell anyone. We got a permission to ask for that waiver in our budget. And that lets us...
And most people don't understand that with Medicaid, you have to get federal approval to make any kind of change.
So now we're going to be making that. So I got the legislature to ask for a waiver through the budget process, which really wasn't the right way to do it, but it got done. Because all the interest groups don't want any waivers or change. But I'm explaining to them that their economic model is not sustainable, and it isn't for the taxpayers of North Carolina.
You came out proposing a managed care, private managed care provider system. As you say, the medical community was very vocal against it. So was
It's an understatement.
pardon me. There was a lot of opposition. The legislature didn't exactly jump on top of it. They basically said for you to go back, restudy the situation, come forward. Can you reveal to us a little bit about what the new Medicaid reforms will look like?
What we're attempting to do is do some pilot programs throughout the state where we try several different experiments and to see what works and what doesn't work. And that's our next stage. But to even get that, there are some people who are afraid to have us experiment in this state, and they're actually bragging on our current system. And there's nothing to brag about because it's bankrupting the state of North Carolina. Not only that, but it's providing poor delivery of service to women, to children, to the elderly, and the needy who need this Medicaid.
Right.
And we, frankly, I think have a lot of fraud that we've got to deal with, too.
Let me move over to transportation reform because, as you said, you uncoupled the 1989 Highway Trust Fund formula.
Equity, that was called the equity formula.
Yeah,
you can't be against the equity formula.
Well, it just distributed money evenly to the 14 DOT districts across the state, regardless of population or traffic or anything else.
Right.
All right, so you came up with a strategic mobility formula, 40% for statewide projects, 30% for regional projects, 30% for local projects. This past week, a joint legislative transportation oversight committee expressed concern over who was going to be making the decisions about these projects. What's your response to them?
They're probably concerned that the politicians won't be making the decisions. That's what they're concerned about. And that's what I've seen is too much political activity in charge of road building. You know, if you go down the North Carolina roads, it's kind of a sad commentary where it goes from 2 lanes to 8 lanes, back to 4 lanes to 8 lanes, and there's no common sense or rhyme or reason due to congestion, safety, or economic development. In fact, where it's widest, it's named after a politician or a former DOT member.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
And we're changing that system, and there are a lot of the good old boys who don't want that, including some members of the legislature, Democrat and Republican.
But the other part of this equation has got to be funding.
Absolutely.
We get about $3 billion a year in state revenues, $1 billion from the feds.
Right.
60% of the state revenue comes from the gas tax. The legislature capped the gas tax at 37.5 cents a gallon. The needs are growing exponentially. It's obvious we got to have more money for transportation. Where do you propose it comes from?
I don't have a proposal yet. That's our next year's goal. And Tony Tata, who's a great DOT secretary, you know, if this guy can build roads in Afghanistan under fire, I figured he can do it in North Carolina. And he can deal with the good old boy network here, both in the urban and rural areas. So we don't have a plan for that yet. But we knew in the short term we needed to get bigger bang for our buck, and that's what the new mobility formula will do versus the old equity formula.
Governor, if my former boss and mentor, Harlan Bowles, former state treasurer Harlan Bowles, who you knew very well, was alive, he would be advising you in the legislature that now is the time for us to pass a massive statewide bond referendum for public infrastructure, roads, water, public schools, and so forth like that. Because he would say interest rates are the lowest that they've been historically, and it would put people back to work. Would you favor such an idea?
Not until we put the vision and plan together, because people aren't going to trust government to say, give us your money, and we have no plan, because they don't trust the old system of how we spent the money. And I learned this as mayor of Charlotte. When I implemented a 25-year transportation plan in Charlotte, I didn't just say, here, trust me. We showed them how the money was going to be spent. We showed the vision for the next 25 years, and part of Tony Tata, Secretary Tata's responsibility is, one is to fix DMV, which I hope to have done by December.
Yeah.
It's going to be some good things. And second is to present a 25-year infrastructure plan for the state of North Carolina. What's interesting, he and Sharon Decker, who is my Secretary of Commerce, I'm going to defend my secretaries from these attacks. That's the only thing that really bothers me. They can attack me, but my secretaries are doing great jobs. Yeah. Tremendous sacrifice.
Well, everybody loves Sharon Decker, universally.
I'm getting kind of jealous of that. I've told her. She's my Jimi Hendrix. She's my rock star. She's fantastic. All of them are doing great jobs, and they're working as a team. But areas like Elizabeth City, which you know well, we recognize that our infrastructure plan doesn't necessarily connect Elizabeth City or Roanoke Rapids to the inside of the state of North Carolina. Like a governor always have done in the
traditionally
past.
think.
Yeah, you connect them with North Carolina. Their best connectivity is going to be with Norfolk, Virginia. And steal the suppliers from Virginia and get up across the border and create jobs in these towns that are dying right now. The reason I know this is because Rock Hill, South Carolina did it to me as mayor.
Right.
They have 8-lane highways coming into Charlotte. And I always go, God, that's great. We're getting all these South Carolina people. What was happening?
Charlotte was where the jobs were.
Charlotte was going out to Rock Hill, too.
Yeah.
And Rock Hill and Lancaster County in that area were getting the spin-off jobs from Charlotte in South Carolina. So we need to think beyond this internal North Carolina old guard inside the border. The political boundaries don't recognize economic boundaries.
Yeah.
In Tennessee and Virginia and South Carolina.
All the way down to Atlanta. You've talked about
Absolutely.
that
So we're looking at it bigger. And this is where, you know, in the short term, the media doesn't understand this. The political pundits don't understand. We're thinking big and large and long term, not short term political battles that you read about and hear about even on your show.
I want to talk about jobs and economic development reform, and we'll do that after we come back from these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
How bad do you want to become a champion? More than you want to breathe?
We see our student athletes and coaches' commitment to championships every day.
Your support enables us to create a competitive advantage that will help the Wolfpack compete for conference and national championships.
Our work at NC State is just beginning. We are asking more from ourselves, our players, and now we are asking more from you. What is your championship commitment?
It's true. Farming is different than it was 50 years ago. We know consumers have questions about how our food is grown today. North Carolina livestock farmers want you to know that they're using the most responsible and caring farming practices to feed our state.
ncanimalag.com.
The North Carolina Medical Society is committed to a healthier North Carolina. We feel as an organization representing over 14,000 physicians that we have a responsibility and an obligation to help our citizens become more healthy. And by doing this, we want to help educate them about ways in which they need to keep themselves healthy through good nutrition, exercise, and maintaining a healthy lifestyle. These ingredients will help not only individual citizens become and maintain a healthier outlook on their lives, but also help contribute to having a healthier state.
We now return to NC Spin.
Continue our one-on-one conversation with Governor Pat McCrory. Governor, when you took office, you said one of your goals was to have our unemployment rate 1% lower than the state of South Carolina within the first year. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. We've got the third highest unemployment rate in the country. For 3 years, the legislature has cut taxes, saying it was going to boost job development. It hasn't done it. What is it going to take to put people back to work?
A long-term sustainable plan. One is the tax reform will help, and I'm very excited about that tax reform. And the other thing is we've got to treat our businesses like customers, and we've begun that process. We won Ashley Furniture back. They almost left us after recruiting them by the previous administration because our regulatory agency wasn't working with them. And they literally almost left in my first 2 weeks in office. And John Scavala, my Secretary of Diener, brought them together and solved the problem using the existing regulations. The other thing is we're completely reforming Commerce Department.
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit about what that...
Well, first of all, we're stepping on some turf. I mean, the Rural Center, the Charlotte Regional Partnership, where I come from, used to be on their board. We had all these layers of organizations where executives were making a couple $100,000 a year, and we had layers of organization, and the customers were going, we're confused on who we even deal with when we're considering North Carolina for employment. So Sharon Decker came to me with a proposal within the first month. She was going to wait a year, and she came to me and said, we can't even afford to wait a year. And we're literally going to put everything under the same umbrella, and we're going to streamline some of these departments and get some of the middle people out and have a more effective strategy on economic development and incentives. And Sharon, my Secretary of Commerce, is going to be coming out with some major proposals. But again, we're stepping on the turf of these organizations that have been around a long time and frankly have had a lot of money.
Yeah.
sitting off on the sideline. And in fact, some of these organizations were more powerful than the governor or the state legislature. So I didn't even know about it until I got here. And I'd meet these people and they say, don't mess with him.
Yeah.
They're powerful. And then I found out why they're powerful. They had $100 million in the bank.
We're going to take another break, and we'll come back and close out with our interview with Governor McCrory after this.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Is your business or trade organization looking for a great North Raleigh address? This beautiful, recently updated office building has 3 spacious offices perfect for law firms, accountants, agencies, and associations of any size. Our beautiful lobby boasts attractive finishes and unique Raleigh artwork. We provide ample parking and quick access to both 440 and 540 right at the corner of Falls of the Neuse and Spring Forest Road. Call us today at 919-832-1416 to schedule a tour with the owner.
North Carolina is a great place to live, work, and raise a family, but we consistently rank in the bottom third for state health. Poor health choices and inactivity cost our state $54 billion a year, dollars that could be saved through healthier living. We can do better, North Carolina. That's why NC Spin is working with health and community organizations to launch a Healthier NC, an education campaign and challenge to live healthier lives. Join us at ahealthiernc.com.
Welcome back to our one-on-one interview with Governor Pat McCrory. Governor, very briefly in the time that's left, tell us what your plans are for the next year.
3 or 4 major objectives. One is energy. That was one of our failed pieces of legislation. We got to get into the energy business in North Carolina. We haven't got the policies or regulations in place, and the legislature needs to move. Second is education. We need to have an education strategy, not just through K through 12, but 1 through 20. And I've got an education cabinet, bipartisan, with we're all working together. And I'm very, very pleased with that. And the third is implementing some of the policies that we just got passed, and the operational issues. And the most important is Medicaid reform, which is going to be the toughest and least enjoyable project that I got to work on.
I know you are out and among people all the time.
Thanks for letting me dress this way. I just got back from the mountains in Silva.
But it's very rare that you have now a chance to speak to a mass audience. Yeah. Is there a message you'd like to deliver to the people of North Carolina, something you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, I'm bullish on North Carolina. We've got the greatest resources underneath our ground, the beauty, the quality of life. We got to unleash these resources, and we've got to change our policies. And for those who are trying to protect the existing policies, my message to them is those policies have not worked for the past 5 or 6 years. Our competition, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and the rest of the world have made those changes. And we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. We're living on a past reputation, all for good reasons, because we have a good reputation. But we've got to change, just like business has got to do in this very competitive environment. I'm here to change things and look for long-term results. This is the best state, and I'm excited about our future. And I'm willing to take a few black eyes as a result. But
Pat, you've got a challenging job. You bear the mantle of leadership. We're pulling for you, and we're counting on you. I hope you've enjoyed this kickoff to our 16th show of year of NC Spin with our one-on-one interview with Governor Pat McCrory. We hope you'll join us next week when we take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for The Spin.
Join us next week and get The Spin on issues facing our state.